So what if you're not normal? First, let's define normal. To be normal means to conform to a standard, or to be what's typical or expected. And what's normal always has to do with what's prevalent among the most people at that point in time, at that location in the world. So if you look at the height of American males, the norm is 5'9". That's the average, at least, right? So the norm would be something within the range, give or take a few inches, of 5'9". If you go very much below that, you're not in the norm. You go very much above that, you're not in the norm. But normal is always essentially what the most number of people aggregate around. So if you're not normal, that's okay. And when it comes to standards of behavior and the way people act, behave in relation to each other, normal is not as clearly defined as how tall you are. It's a set of behaviors. And most people, they act normal. They have this face on. They know what's expected of them, and they know how to respond, they know how to talk, they've mastered the art, so to say. But that's not really who they are. So if you're not normal, and you act normal, what are people going to think you are? They're going to think you're normal. But other people are doing the same thing. It's very rare to find somebody who truly is exactly who they are, what they're expressing at that moment. So it's important not to feel as alone if you don't fall into norms, because again, norms aggregate around essentially the middle. When it comes to being a free thinker, it's important to challenge the norm. It doesn't mean to break out of it. Norms often are there because they have stood the test of time. So a good norm is that humans are bipedal. We walk on 2 legs rather than on 4. Or we have 2 legs rather than 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 100 like a centipede. That's a good norm. A bad norm would be the way people treat each other, where it's not as warm or as connective as it could be. So there's good and bads to various norms, but it's always important to be able to look beyond the norms, culturally, in terms of manners of thinking, manners of action, behavior, the way to forge your own life path. And every person is unique, so no person is actually normal. They just may fit as per certain characteristics into what the idea of normal is. An example of a norm changing: in the 60s, models were generally heavier than they are now. So that norm has changed. Whether their hair is curly or straight, that standard of beauty has changed. And these are both limited slices of time, the 1960s to the 2020s. Think about 300-400 years ago. Think about 1,000 years ago. Think about 1,000 years from now. Think about how it may differ at different parts of the world today. So norms are basically societal constructions. And again, that's not a bad thing. It simply is. We have to seek to understand everything that we're dealing with and neither judge it as good or bad, but to understand why it exists and to see where we can move beyond them when appropriate, if that's an authentic expression of ourselves. So when it comes to being yourself and forging your own life path, there have never been 2 identical people. If you look at my fingerprints and yours and every other person that's ever lived, within this small 1 square inch thing, the fingerprint is different. There's never been 2 of the same. So it's important to understand who you are regardless of the idea of norms, and to be okay with expressing that, and to be okay with being that. When people are able to truly be themselves, you live in a free society, and you contribute to your own freedom and to the freedom of others, because it gives them permission to do the same themselves. I was at a play one day, and I talked to one of the actors afterwards, and he said, "I like having you in the play because I can always get a good laugh out of you." I'm like, "Nice." And he said, "It gives other people permission to laugh." Everything you do contributes to the room, to the world. Every action, every thought, every expression, it's all part of the whole. And the more vibrant and the more you are, the more authentic you are, the more it allows other people to do the same. And it clears so much of the repression, so much of the uneasiness that comes from needing to adhere to norms and needing to adhere to expectations, many of which are arbitrary, and the downside of which leads to people indulging in substances, being really unhappy for whatever reasons, treating others badly. So, with the expression of your true self, regardless of norms, a lot of beauty comes about. There could be a price to pay. People may not accept you, but chances are, in time they will. But even if they don't, you generally find people who will. And that's why people of similar type, of similar interest, end up congregating with each other. I learned a phrase in college my freshman year from a really nice guy. He said, the people who mind don't yeah, no, that was right. The people who mind don't matter. And the people who don't mind, the people who mind don't matter. And the people who matter don't mind. And that's the best way to actually chart an authentic path and know that you'll be surrounded with the right people. So I hope this helped you, and I hope we can all really, truly be ourselves, with or without norms. Good example of this. Have you seen the Pirates of the Caribbean? So, Jack Sparrow, played by Johnny Depp, was written by the writers as a straight-laced, upstanding, classic pirate, like a James Bond type pirate. Serious guy, always knows what he's doing. And Johnny Depp came into the audition and did the whole, "But you have heard of me," that whole thing. And they loved it. They rewrote some of the lines to work that into his character, but they didn't know that that's what they wanted. They thought they wanted one thing, and he presented something else, and it turns out that that's what they wanted. That's my point in saying, when you express yourself, you may actually change other people's ideas and standards. You may change the norm. And one of the coolest parts of that movie and that whole series is Johnny Depp's character. He's the only person who's been in all 5 movies, to my knowledge at least. That's the power of the truth. There is no norm. There is no norm that is completely binding, I'll put it like that. But there is you. When I was in high school, I got made fun of a lot because I was very flowery. I'd give like lots of compliments. I'd be very flamboyant, and I would run like between classes I had a girlfriend and I'd see her, and then I'd run to the lunch line and get there first, and people keep saying, "Run, Forrest, run!" And I thought they were just, they could have been making fun of me. I thought they were just cheering me on. I don't really know. And I didn't know I was made fun of until one of my friends told me in college. And at that point, it didn't matter. But my point is that I was being myself. And I loved it. I enjoyed it. And it didn't really matter what people said, because the people who minded didn't really matter, because they didn't say that stuff to me, and I probably didn't hang out with them that much. Or I might have hung out with them, and might have still been talking behind my back. But the people who did matter, who I was actually very close with, they didn't mind. I was just being me. And that's how I've been living my life too, with my life path, with my speeches, my videos, and everything. I'm just trying to do and be myself, and see what that feels like for me, and to see what that can do for the